Starting today, a quote by Lawrence J. Peter, author of The Peter Principle. Sometimes I wonder whether the world is being run by smart people who are putting us on, or by imbeciles who really mean it. This week we had the G7 meeting in Japan. Of course, the lack of economic growth topped the agenda. By last count, I think it was 11,281 meetings so far on the global economy, getting it going, whether it's by G7 countries, G20, the elites at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and many more, including provincial finance minister meetings. And the big news is that none of them have produced anything approaching an effective plan. Well, today I'm going to tell you why, and I suspect you're not going to hear it anywhere else in the mainstream media. During the week I commented on Prime Minister Trudeau's recommendation that to revive economic growth in countries like France or Greece, Spain, all over South America, Asia, is for governments to borrow and spend more. I got to admit, I sort of got taken aback by that. I mean, not enough government borrowing and spending is hardly the problem with the vast majority of countries in the world. There's been a multi-trillion-dollar explosion in government debt since the subprime crisis. We've got record low interest rates, even negative rates, along with unprecedented creation of money under quantitative easing. And none of it's worked. So I hardly think that recommending more of the same is going to be a winner. But the recommendation is a reflection of a far bigger problem. I mean, think about it. Every government, regardless of ideological bent, wants to see more economic growth. Here's the point. They have no idea what to do. So hence, they recommend more of the same, as Mr. Trudeau just did. The inadequacy of big government intervention model is on full display. I mean, you've got the collapse of Venezuela. You've got the long-term stagnation of European economies. I mean, at some point, we have to wake up and answer the question that if governments can snap their policy fingers and produce jobs and economic growth as they continue to promise, then why haven't they been able to do it? Of course, big government advocates on the progressive left, or CBC panels, or public sector elites, others in organized labor, editorial writers, political commentators, school teachers, they have no idea. So they ignore the question and instead push for even more of the same. All the promises of job creation, economic growth have failed to materialize. But what's going on is far more profound than the overused cliche, insanity is the same thing, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. No. Leaders throughout the world, including Canada, talk about pushing economic growth, but the truth is their priority is to protect the status quo. Policies to foster economic growth, including in Canada, always take a back seat to the overriding goal of protecting the status quo, whether you're talking about public sector, the size of government, protection of special interests, the public education establishment, the regulatory environment, and pet political policies. And that just simply guarantees that the policies won't work, haven't worked. That's why after 7-8 years of these policy approaches, these meetings, these policy prescriptions, they have not worked. There's no doubt on that one. And it gets to the root of why politicians, by the way, continue to ignore the basics of economics and finance. You're seeing it right now in Alberta with the advent of a carbon tax. Now, in terms of environmental impact, it's going to be positive. But because the government is choosing to keep the estimated $6 billion it will raise in the new tax, it will be very negative for the economy. There's no exceptions. When governments raise taxes, doesn't matter if you're left, right, or center, that hurts the economy. They've chosen their environmental agenda and growing government bureaucracy at the expense of economic growth. I mean, if the economy was the priority, then the carbon tax, would be revenue neutral. But that's not all. In order to enhance long-term economic growth and employment, we need a dramatic change. I mean, look at the world we're living in, and we think we can do it incrementally. No, the status quo has got to change. We have to change the operational structure of government. Not a chance we'll do it. We got to change labor laws that prohibit and discourage capital investment and employment. Well, you see that throughout Europe. It's an absolute disaster. No changes there. We got to change the public school curriculum to appreciate what's going on in the world, what the employment skills needed going forward will be. But we're not going to do that. We need to enhance adult education to help workers adjust and learn new skills. Not doing that. We have a desperate need to revamp and get rid of useless regulations that discourage economic growth, but none of it's on the agenda. The status quo has to change, but the power groups are intellectually unable, unwilling to take the necessary steps. And instead, all we're getting is more of the same. And meanwhile, cronyism thrives and hurts the economy. Political favors and deals for special interests abound and hurts the economy. Corruption increases and hurts the economy. Incompetence is protected, which hurts the economy. And there's a lack of accountability in spending tax dollars. That's the norm. And of course, changing any of that, none of that is going to be on the agenda. Meanwhile, they keep talking. Meanwhile, they keep prescribing things that cannot work. And meanwhile, economies suffer and employment rises.